The industry has been through so much change. The industry is so supportive of, every restaurateur, every chef, every wait staff, every sommelier that's within it. So the ability for us to progress, to move forward and to change and to make positive change in the industry, no time like the present to do it.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Working under great mentors can provide the building blocks of opportunity. And taking that next step to showcase your own talent can be intimidating for some. But unless you walk through the door, you'll never know the benefits and rewards of carving your own career. Rosheen Kaul is the head chef of Etta in Melbourne. Rosheen, how are you?
I'm really good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for coming on the show. You've really sort of made a real name for yourself and in your role at Etta. But what was it like for you taking that role when you first sort of accepted the job?
Well, it actually took quite a lot of convincing, and I was terrified. And I mean, in a lot of ways, I still am actually, but it's just I'm scared of different things now.
Well, you've really made it your own. Take us back to that time, and you said it took a little bit of time. Take us through that process and the doubts that you had, and then what finally got you over the line.
Well, I did. Actually, the timing is pretty good. I did an International Women's Day dinner at Etta with the previous head chef in 2020. And that's where I met my delightful boss and the owner of Etta, Hannah Green. And so we had, some lovely, friendly interactions, not too much more beyond that. And in 2020, I wrote a zine with a friend of mine, Joanna Hu. We got quite a bit of publicity for it because it was a very cool, very aptly named isolation cookbook. And because there was a little bit of press, I think I may have caught Hannah's attention, and she cold called me in August of 2020, offering me the position. Because she hadn't forgotten me, basically, in her own words, but more than anything else I think she just was quite interested to just chat further and just see if she could find a personality that she could work with and just have as the right person, I guess, to be with her in that restaurant, in that space. And she was convinced that it was me. But I wasn't so easily convinced. Yeah, because I had only actually been promoted to chef de partie at Dinner by Heston before I had lost my job there due to the closure. So I was at best, I was a mid-level chef, and I had still plenty to learn. I still have obviously much to learn in terms of honing my skill as a chef. And so that was my major concern. That was my major stop. And also I hadn't run a team. I hadn't run a kitchen. I hadn't any of the experience that I wanted before I finally took the reins of my own kitchen. I couldn't see it for at least, 8 to 10 years from now, basically. Very, very much not ready. And it was actually basically, it was the conversation really went, thank you so much, but no, absolutely not. But it was over a course of a few phone calls, and she basically wore me down. She was basically like, have you written a menu before? And I was like, yes, I have. It's like, have you run a team before? How many chefs do you look after at dinner? I was like, at any one time, 6 to 7 in my section. And she was like, cool, Etta's only got 4 chefs. One of them is you. And I was like, all right. She was like, have you costed a menu before? I was like, yes, I have. And she was like, that's your whole job. Anything else I can teach you? And I was like, okay, but I mean, it was a really a beautiful way to simplify what it is that I do. But, as I've obviously come to learn, it's significantly more than that in my day to day. But, when she put it that way, I was like, oh, I don't know, I guess. And she's like, look, just come cook for me. And I ended up doing did a lunch for 12 people, including, the head chef at Hazel, a few other unexpected industry big dogs that I did not expect to see. Did a lunch, she was happy, and she offered me the position. And here we are. Yeah.
What was it like then once you started the role, with your sort of apprehension to take it on at first, but once you sort of got in there and sort of got your hands on the tools, how did it feel? Was there a time when you felt like, yeah, I've got a handle of this and this is kind of quite an exciting journey?
No. And I mean, it would be, there have been times when I have felt that, I think this is under control now, but then there'll be one curveball after another. Obviously, of course, we all lived through last year. And, with persistent closures, staff shortages, constantly, I mean, we'll use that word pivoting as we love, constantly pivoting to takeaway. There was never really that time to sort of get momentum going. But I think the key for me has been finding the right people, and more than anything else, just having and keeping the staff that were the right ones and because initially it was just a matter of getting hands in, just, get whoever you can, and just get this place going because, of course we'd been closed for far too long and we just needed bums on seats again. And it was hard, but it was a baptism by fire, truly. And we had a really, and we do have a very supportive local community, and they were just keen to be back. They were keen to see they were wondering who was cooking. They just wanted to know who I was. And that sheer amount of support and the amount of people who just come to the class and be like, this is great. This is your first time. This is great. Who are you? And so it was really just because I had that amount of support from everybody, the front of house, the people in the kitchen, from Hannah, especially Hannah. I never felt that I was, drowning, but it was my own, I think it was my own pride and my own desperation to do as well as I could. That was what made it truly difficult. Yeah.
Well, you've really made the position your own, and I want to explore what you're doing at Etta in a little while, but take us back to when you were young in your family. Sort of what role did food play in your family?
Well, I'm of mixed Asian heritage. My mom and my dad met in Singapore, but my dad is from Kashmir. My mom is further on again. She's of Peranakan Chinese, a little bit of Indonesian, a little Filipino, just very mixed. We're a very mixed family. I was born in Singapore as well. And food has been sort of the unifying thread for my family, and also just the way that we bond, we show love, we communicate. My parents are both excellent cooks. And I was a pretty gluttonous little child. So it's always been a very, very joyful, very positive experience for me eating. I love it so much. I associate it with a lot of love, and very much a lot of identity. So with the way that I cook now, it's just a matter of trying to reconcile my identity with food. And it's very much, it runs deep, and but it's also just a really happy, really beautiful thing. I love the exposure that I've had through my family.
Do you have any stories of feasts or celebrations or dishes that you have fond memories of from your childhood?
Well, the beautiful thing about being from such a multicultural family, and my family are practicing Hindus as well, so we celebrate the major Hindu festivals. So we've got Diwali, Shivratri. We all have there are dishes that we'll cook for the because we will fast pure vegetarian, which means no onion, no garlic. So we'll do. So my dad will cook a spread of 7 to 8, sometimes if he's feeling up to it 9, 10 dishes. Very specific Kashmiri vegetarian dishes during the fasting day. And he won't eat, of course, until sunset, but the family will all eat. And then the next day we'll have another feasting day of same amount of meat dishes. And these are all dishes that have a specific significance. And we'll do this every year. It's a thing that we do, and it's the time of year that I'm expected to also be at home. I'll take a day off work, take the night off, you have to be here. And then from my mum's side, of course, we've got Chinese New Year. So we have, all of the related festivities. We do the Yisang. Ideally, we try to be home in Singapore and eat all the symbolic dishes you're supposed to eat. So I get all of that. I get all of the food from all of the cultures. Yeah, it's pretty special. It's pretty special.
With such a special and rich sort of connection with food in your family, did you always envisage a career in food?
Absolutely not. I was no way. I mean, I'm. Uh, I was trying to be a good Asian girl. Go to university, get a good job. Make my parents proud via one of the very acceptable career paths of doctor, lawyer, engineer, some sort of science. And I did. I gave it a red hot go. I did. I really did. But I just my mum made a fleeting comment one day because I was really struggling at uni. I changed my course a couple of times, and I just wasn't. I was a bit lost, really. And she made a comment one day where she was like, once you finish uni, you can do whatever you want. And I'd had it in my head that I wanted to get into a kitchen because it kind of made the most sense for me because I wasn't really interested in anything else as much as I was in eating. So that was, if I worked backwards for what I didn't want to do and what I did want to do in the day, I was like, well, I only really look forward to my meals. So let's just associate that and let's make that a career. And so, I took that as a blessing, and I got a kitchen hand job a week later, to their horror, to their absolute horror. And I loved it. I loved because I was a dishie, and I really struggled to get a dishie job too, because my previous place of employment was Jimmy Choo, so I was working in luxury fashion. So, so I would drop resumes off, and they would just look at me and be like, "Are you kidding?" But I eventually got one, and it was fantastic. It was a great foot into the door, really.
What were the really important moments early on and important kitchens that you worked in those first couple of years that sort of started to build a foundation for you?
Actually, now that I think back, that first cafe that I worked with is where I first experienced, excuse me, a real support for attitude, where the owners and the owners' parents were, even though they knew that I was as green as I could go, I was so excited to just be chopping things and unplugging the drain and learning what a grease trap was. And I was just having a great time. And I think because I was having probably a really irritating great time because they were struggling a bit. I think because of that, they were like, let's just keep her around because she's just really keen to do all this dirty stuff. And that was the first time I was like, I think this can actually be something that I want to do, because I can see that, if you have the right people around you, then, you can, what would be, I guess, in a lot of ways, a very difficult, very stressful time in your day is actually, it could be really fun. And from then I decided to pursue formal training. So I went to join Huck, which was just down the road to where I was working. That was when it was, on Smith Street at the time. So Victor was only a year in. So it was still very young, very aggressively trying to make its mark on Melbourne. And I joined that kitchen as a first year apprentice, and I learned so much. I think probably, even though I had a lot more formal training at Dinner by Heston, I think in terms of how it's informed the way that I use my heritage in my cooking, but via my European training, I think I still use those skills that I learned from that kitchen every day enormously. Wow. Yeah.
Victor Leong has made a huge impact on the culinary landscape since then. But what was it like in that kitchen, and what was he like to work with?
Well, it was a pretty aggressive kitchen, but at the same time, it was like during the day, it wasn't too bad. It was quite nice. The team was really lovely, and we had these magnificent staff meals because it was a fully Asian kitchen, and that was the way that we show affection in Asian culture as well. So we always ate in traditional Chinese style. We always had rice, a few dishes, and soup. And there was a lot of care, and there was a lot of heckling. Like it was all in good fun. And then of course when I got to service, it was, just the stress levels were turned to 1,000,000. And then it got pretty intense. But beyond that, it was a really fantastic kitchen to work in. I learned so much. I learned how to sharpen my knives there. I learned the importance of cooking for your staff. I learned the importance of, you can be you can be aggressive is not the word that I'm looking for, but you can be quite short and quite, if you need to get your job done, you need to get your job done. But, that you put it all away, you stop that the second service is over. You go around, you thank everybody, you have a drink together because it's not personal. And that ability to turn it on and off as well. So it's service time, put your head down, get your job done. But after that, it's like nothing's personal, everything's fine. We're all mates.
What were some of the real sort of key moments for you that set you on the path to become the chef that you are?
I think that the real foundation of my training came from Dinner by Heston. I managed to get a foot in the door there. I was the first apprentice they ever hired. And it was, that kitchen was magnificent. The team was a fully international team. There was only a sprinkling of Australians there. And, everyone's resumes read like a 50 best list. It was out of this world. And every chef that was there either was an expert on something very particular, or they knew the menu inside out. They knew the history of the food inside out. It was such a well-educated, motivated team. And, we were all just trying to outcook each other every day. It was a really, really, really difficult job. We had massive days, and you before you'd walk in the door, you would inhale, exhale, and then get in there and start running. It was a lot. It was a lot. And, you learn that, no matter how busy you are, there is no excuse for making mistakes. There's no imperfection. There's nothing that will accept that aside from the best, because every customer could be dining there for the very first time. And so you owe them the best experience they could have, because even though it's a repetitive job for you, it's, somebody's, experiencing this magic for, they could have saved up for it, could have flown in for it from somewhere else, so you owe them that. And, we had that really drilled into our heads, really, that it's not about you, it's about them. Because people, for a lot of people, especially for Heston Blumenthal's food, people have been, people would be chasing the chef all over the world, being like, one day I just really, really, really want to eat this food. And when you get there and you're like, sorry, I don't have these 3 dishes because the chefs didn't make it today, it's pretty disappointing. Yes. Yeah, so there was no excuse. There was no excuse for anything but the best. There was, yeah.
Dinner by Heston ended up closing. What did you do in that period of time leading up to sort of that closure and everything that's happened in the world in the last couple of years? Well,
dinner closed over quite a long period of time. It was several months before they finally shut the doors. And they did try and significant changes. Well, mostly one to the menu, where they went from an a la carte menu to a full degustation menu. They also tried to really, really keep a handle on our hours, but with the volume that we do, and with the volume that we did, and with the, of course, expectation and the standard that we still had to do, it was difficult, because they shrank our hours, but we still had to get the same job done. So it was just another level of pressure, because it was like, it's fine, we'll just come an hour earlier. They're like, you can't, sorry, too bad. So yeah, it was hard. It was honestly, I am so disappointed that restaurant closed. I wasn't ready for it to close. I wasn't finished learning yet from there. Yeah. Yeah, it was very, very disappointing. Heartbreaking even.
The last 2 years have had an incredible impact on so many. What's it leading up to Etta? What has it been like for you, the impact of the pandemic?
I was one of the very lucky ones. I was very fortunate because I had my parents' house to live in. I had my parents' home as well, and we had a very good relationship. And because of that, I wasn't financially stressed out. So I do know that in terms of compared to a lot of people who went through the pandemic, I was truly fine. And because I had that safety net, I was able to think and spend a lot of time thinking that if my career of being a chef was no longer viable in this world, or in a post-pandemic world, what else could I do? And I thought about it, and I came to the conclusion that whatever I did, I really, really wanted to still work in food. And from what I could do from where I was sitting, that became writing. And I called up a friend of mine, Joanna, who is a fantastic illustrator, but she's also ex-hospo. She used to work at the Fat Duck, and then she worked at Dinner by Hester for a while, so that's how I met her. She also was at home, just waiting it out. And I was like, hey, do you want to just do a little zine of just like a couple of Chinese recipes, and you just illustrate them, and then we'll just print a couple and see if anybody cares? And she was like, yeah, that sounds great, because we were both pretty bored. And being being hospo perfectionists as well, we ended up going way overboard. Yeah. But the final result, which we wrote it in a week, but it was a week of no sleep. It was editing, it was formatting, it was, Joe was hand painting everything. We ended up getting it printed in stunning, heavy card as well. And it was beautiful. And we ended up selling the 20 copies we'd printed within like a few minutes to people who are like just friends of ours. And then we ended up getting picked up by The Guardian about it, because it started getting a bit of traction on our page. And then we got picked up by Broadsheet, and then we ended up being mentioned in the Good Food Guide, and we printed a couple of different volumes of it as well. It was just a really lovely way of, one, passing the time, but two, having a really amazing creative outlet where Joe was drawing, I was writing, and I was taking photos on my iPhone, and they were just ending up really lovely as well. But the whole thing was just such a great way to find a new niche, carve out a new niche for ourselves in a pandemic world.
Did that experience change your perceptions or the way you approach food?
It really did, because prior to that, I was only cooking, other people's food. I was cooking the food of the chefs that I had, sought out to work with. And I'd never written a recipe formally before. I'd never cooked my own take on anything before. And the first edition was just basic Chinese cooking, because I took it upon myself to, after quite a lot of contact with a lot of people off my personal Instagram page, asking me how I was cooking this and this and this, and how to cook that, and how to use a wok. And I was like, there's clearly a lot of people who are cooking at home who don't really know how to approach cooking Asian foods, or particularly Chinese food. And I was like, I have some base knowledge here, being, of the heritage, but also having worked in a Chinese kitchen. So I was like, you know what, I'll take it upon myself, and I'll just, I'll write it up for you. And, I'll write you some basic recipes, like how to cook rice, how to stir fry properly, how to stir fry green vegetables, how to make a broth, all the basic tenets of Chinese cooking. Instead of just seeing, which is heartbreaking, seeing like stir fry sauce, pre-cut stir fry vegetables. I'm like, what is that? I don't even know what that is. Stir fry strips. I'm like, guys, this cuisine is, it's beautiful, it's ancient, it's precise, and you have the time, I have the time, so let me show you. And that was the first one. That was all basics. And the second one that we did was me just going full freestyle on my heritage. I had Beijing hot chicken. I had a Sichuan fondue. I just went nuts, but it was, and that one was a fully colored. We embossed it in gold. We just went for it. And that was the second one. And, it was really from the second one that I came into my own, and I figured out that was how I express myself in food. It was just, taking the things that I love from my heritage and, going for it. Really. Yeah.
Well, when you landed the job at Etta, how did you approach the food, given that the restaurant already existed there? You were finding your voice. It was a new role. Well, what did you do in those early stages in regards to the menu?
So being a pre-existing restaurant meant that there were certain things on the menu that the customers had, like, they were always going there The really good thing was that because there had already been two chefs before me that had already been basically solidified as the foundation of Etta and what had to always be there, which was really, really helpful because, if you were like, if you're just told, all right, here's a restaurant, here's a menu, enjoy, love your life. It's too much. It's too much. And, you panic and you're like, oh my God, like, which entree represents me? What meat do I like? Like, how do I cook that? The whole thing is just, it's overwhelming. And Etta had not the foundation of the menu where there always had to be sourdough and there always had to be some sort of chicken on the menu, but there was also a wood fire. And that fire is basically the only source of heat that's in that kitchen. So there's a fire and there's two stoves and there's an oven. And so whatever happened or whatever you did, everything had to be informed by ember cooking or wood fire cooking. Which is also something that was another reason why I was like, absolutely not better. um, but having that structure and also knowing that, and having been somebody who's grown up in Melbourne, who's dined in Melbourne and is very familiar with, what people expect for wine-friendly dining, you've got very specific style of eating. You've got your sharing style. You're always going to have oysters. You're always going to have some sort of a few cold dishes. You'll always have some sort of cheese curd. We love our burrata. We love stracciatella in Melbourne. You'll have a large format meat. You'll have lots of seasonal vegetables. You have your sides. You'll have a couple of desserts. Always speaking of provenance. Always speaking of season. And it was actually within that, there were so many rules that I had to follow. Within that, it was quite easy just to, flick a bit of my heritage through there. It was actually, I was actually really fortunate to have that structure in place. Really, really fortunate.
How much has your food changed since that sort of early days to now? Has there been quite an evolution now that you've got a handle on the position?
It actually just made a lot more sense now because you could see from the beginning that there were less conceived ideas, but it was already running through the menu that it was the direction that I was kind of leaning in, and I really struggled to, and actually we all struggle in the restaurant to actually have a nice little soundbite of our style of cooking. And Etta, well, like, what are you cooking? Is it Asian? Like, it's not though. And like, is it Australian? I'm like, I guess it's very Melbourne. Really, I don't really know what it is, to be honest, but it's definitely still follows that structure. We've still got bread, we've still got oysters, we've still got our cheese curds, we've still got our large format meats. You still order in groups of, a couple of starters, a couple of mains. You can order a bit more if you like. You can snack, you can have a big meal. It's up to you. It's still unashamedly, it's Etta. It is Etta. It is the experience that you can experience it the way you always have. Whereas the flavors have just been turned up to a million.
Do you have any examples of dishes that you have on the menu at the moment that sort of typifies your cooking and that sort of structure that Etta has given you?
There's one dish that Hannah Green loves to keep saying that this is me on a plate, which is actually not the one that I would expect either, but it's just our fried zucchini flour. And the sauce that I serve it with it began as an almond tarator, informed by when I used to eat the one at Rumi down the road, and it would just blow my mind. And it started as a tarator, and it ended up with Chinese fermented tofu. It's got silken tofu in it. It's got rice wine in it. So it's not really tarator anymore, and it's still got almond in it. But, it's taken about 15 steps in a different direction. And then we've got a very classic Sichuan chili oil that we make in-house with, 4 different kinds of dried chilies. And we've got, it takes a bit of time and quite a lot of work. And also, if you eat it all together, it's really aromatic, and it's really aromatic and it's really Chinese tasting. But then you've got the zucchini flour that's grown by our favorite farmers, Matt and Joe from Mushrooms Anonymous. So we get to talk about the provenance. And I don't stuff it as well because I'm trying to keep my labor costs down because I don't have time to stuff zucchini flowers. So it's all it's very me. It's very me where you look at it and you're like, it's zucchini flour. I know how to eat that. I know what it is. And you eat it and you're like, what is that? That's not tarator. That's not how you eat a zucchini flour. But it's everything that we are. It's provenance, it's heritage, it's accessible, it's Melbourne, it's seasonal. Yeah, I think that's the dish that's the most me, I suppose.
Hannah Green has created an amazing venue there. What's the working relationship like with you and her?
Hannah and I either describe ourselves as two peas in a pod or the terrible two. We we get along so incredibly well, and she really trusts me, which is the most important thing for our relationship. Where I think because we've come from a very similar background of fine dining, and so we know that there are, with all the small things and with personal standard, that we expect the same, we work the same way. But of course, we are of this mindset where we don't want what came with fine dining to be in the restaurant. The stress, the pressure, the prevalence of mental illness. We don't want that in the environment that we are dictating. And so, there's all of these things are unspoken, but they also, of course they are spoken about too, but the way that we work is so cohesive, and just the way that she trusts me to do basically whatever I want, but with respect to what the restaurant is, with the wine that we pour with our customers. Yeah, we've got a very special relationship, Hannah and I.
You're part of a really important sort of new wave restaurant in the Melbourne landscape. What is it that you love about what you do?
I love that. I love the honesty in what we do at Etta as well. I love that we are all sort of building a new world, because we have we have the platform, I think, and we've had, because the industry has been through so much change. The industry is so supportive of every restaurateur, every chef, every wait staff, every sommelier that's within it. So the ability for us to progress, to move forward, and to change, and to make positive change in the industry, is no time like the present to do it. And if you look, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it's the way that Melbourne dined was very well dictated. The way that, the world dined was very much, not even so much that it was a boys' club per se, because that isn't necessarily the case, but just the way that people expected to experience or have dining experiences, versus now where you've got customers who are just so beautiful, and because they're just happy to be out, they're happy to be out to support their local restaurants, to go out and eat, to explore new dining experiences. We're in a really special time where everyone's just really accepting and really receiving everything so well. So we're very, definitely.
Well, Rosheen, it's been an honour to have you on Deep in the Weeds today to hear a part of your story, and I know there's so much more of it to come. You're just getting started, really. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.